Hello and welcome to the lesson. Today we'll learn how to work with classes and identifiers in CSS. You can see 4 third-level headings on the page. I'd like to simultaneously change their color. What's the best way to do it? I'll type H3 followed by curly brackets inside the style definition section. I've just created an H3 selector. Let's say I'd like the headings to be blue. First, I'll add the color property inside the brackets and set the value to blue. After refreshing the page, we see that the headings are now blue. However, it's quite common to set the same formatting for only a subset of elements. Adding inline style definitions is a lengthy process, so let me show you a better way to deal with the problem. I'll create a so-called class within the style definition and name it blue. CSS classes may have any name, but they must always start with a dot. Inside the bracket, I'll add the color property and set the value to blue. And just like that, the class is finished. Let's now assign it to the proper elements. I'll do this by assigning the class attribute to the opening tag. Then, all I have to do is to specify the name of the class I want to use. As you can see, just the first headline changed color after the refresh. Using the same method, I'll now assign a class to the second heading. After a refresh, the second heading has changed color too. In this way, we can assign common formatting to elements within a page. Let's now create a class for underlined font of 25 pixels. I'll call it main heading. Inside the curly brackets, I'll add the font size property and set the value to 25 pixels. Next, I'll add the text decoration property and set the value to underline. I'll assign the completed class to the third heading by using the class attribute. After a refresh, we can see the result. The heading is somewhat larger and is now underlined. It's also possible and quite easy to combine classes. All we have to do is list all the classes we want to apply inside the class attribute. I'll add a second class named main heading to the first heading. Notice that I've used a space to separate the class names. After a refresh, we can see that the first heading is now formatted by both the blue class and the main heading class. Classes are similar to so-called identifiers. I'll create one inside the style definition section and name it italic. Notice that unlike a class, an identifier is marked with a hash sign. Now I'll add the font style property and set the value to italic. The font of the text inside an element with this identifier applied will be changed to italics. Let's test this on the last heading, for example. To add the identifier, I first have to add the ID attribute. Next, I'll just type the name of the identifier inside the quotation marks. I'll type in italic and hit refresh. As you can see, the last heading is now in italics. So how exactly are identifiers different from classes? As you can see, I can use a class for several elements at the same time. However, an identifier can only be used for a single, unique element in a given document. What happens if I copy and paste an element with an ID applied? The code will be invalid. Let's try it. I'm using the keyboard shortcut to validate the document. As we can see, the validator gives us an error message, which was caused by the repeated use of the same ID. Remember that every identifier is unique and can only be used once inside a single document. I look forward to seeing you at the next lesson.